In the brittle silence of our living room that fateful evening, a tiny glow from her purse shattered the calm, like a flare in the dead of night. I watched, frozen, as a forgotten second phone lit up with a single, damning text, a message that would unravel the fragile tapestry of our marriage. In that electrifying moment, every beat of my heart screamed betrayal, and the room seemed to close in around me with the weight of unsaid truths and broken promises. I felt a crushing isolation, as if time itself had stalled, leaving me suspended in a moment of raw, unyielding pain. I had never imagined that our life together, built on years of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and quiet routines, could come undone so abruptly. That night, the ordinary became extraordinary, a nightmare hidden in the mundane. I had always trusted her implicitly, never doubting the silent, steadfast bond we had nurtured over time. But that glowing screen revealed a hidden narrative, one that I had never been privy to, and in that instant, my world splintered. It started innocuously. I was tidying up in the living room after dinner, organizing the scattered remnants of a day that had felt as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. As I reached for the coat she'd left on the armchair, my fingers brushed against something unusual in her purse, a second phone I had never seen before. Curiosity mingled with a creeping sense of dread as I turned it over in my hand, wondering how it had gone unnoticed all these years. The device, tucked away behind a wallet and some old receipts, was as mysterious as it was out of place in our shared life. I remember feeling an inexplicable shiver, a premonition of the storm that was about to break. With trembling hands, I powered it on, and as if scripted by fate, the screen flickered to life. A single text message had arrived, a message that was not meant for me, yet now laid bare the hidden fissures in our union. The words on the screen were blunt, yet laced with a sentiment so potent that it sent ripples through my soul. I felt an overwhelming mixture of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. I slumped into the sofa, the cold reality of betrayal seeping through every fiber of my being. My mind raced, churning through memories of whispered promises and quiet intimacies that I had once believed were sacrosanct. Questions piled up. Who was she texting? For how long had this secret been buried alongside the mundane items in her purse? And most painfully, had our entire life together been built on a foundation of lies? As I stared at that text, a digital manifestation of infidelity and deception, the room seemed to blur around me. The sound of the television, the ticking of the clock, even the soft hum of the refrigerator, all faded into an oppressive silence. I felt detached from the world, as if I were an observer of a tragedy unfolding in slow motion. The text was brief, almost clinical in its delivery, yet its impact was anything but. It was a cold, undeniable declaration that our shared history was not as secure as I had believed. In the days that followed, my mind became a battlefield of conflicting emotions. I oscillated between disbelief and the searing pain of betrayal. I replayed every conversation, every shared glance, trying desperately to uncover signs that I had missed. The quiet moments we once cherished now transformed into a series of interrogations with myself. Had I been too blind, too trusting? The familiar creak of the floorboards under her footsteps, once a comforting rhythm in our home, now struck me as a harbinger of doom. That initial discovery set off a cascade of events that would ultimately force me to confront the darkest corners of my own insecurities. I began to question everything, her silences, her laughter, even her affectionate gestures that, in retrospect, might have been laced with unspoken regret. Every artifact of our life together seemed to be imbued with the memory of that one damning text. It was as if the very air around me had become charged with the residue of betrayal, and I was left to navigate a labyrinth of shattered trust and disintegrating promises. One sleepless night, I found myself standing in the kitchen, the cool light of the refrigerator casting long shadows on the linoleum floor. I clutched the second phone like a lifeline, my mind swirling with doubts and despair. How could I reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the reality that was now staring me in the face? I remembered the gentle touch of her hand, the reassuring murmur of her voice, and the shared dreams that had once lit up our future. Now, those dreams lay in ruins, scattered like ashes in the wind. I wrestled with a tidal wave of emotions, rage at the deceit, sorrow for the loss of our past, and a profound sense of disillusionment that threatened to engulf me. The realization hit me with a brutal clarity. The life we had built together was now irrevocably altered. I began to understand that trust, once broken, leaves scars that may never fully heal. The forgotten phone, with its glowing screen and its silent, lethal message, had become the emblem of our disintegrated connection, a constant reminder that the past we cherished was nothing more than an illusion. In my isolation, I sought solace in the quiet corners of our home, the study where I had spent countless hours immersed in books, the balcony where I once admired the city skyline with her by my side. But even these familiar spaces were tainted by the specter of that fateful text. Every creak, every murmur of the night, seemed to whisper the same painful truth: nothing was as it seemed. I began to document my thoughts, scribbling furiously in a journal that had long lain neglected on my desk. With each written word, I attempted to piece together the fragments of a reality that was rapidly dissolving before my eyes. I questioned whether I had been naive in assuming that our love was invincible, that the sanctity of our vows would protect us from the corrosive effects of hidden secrets. The text had shattered not just our marriage, but also my self-image, leaving me to grapple with a profound sense of inadequacy and loss. I recall vividly the moment when I decided that I could no longer bury my anguish in silence. The weight of the secret was too immense to bear alone, and I reached out to a close friend, a confidant who had always been there during the brighter days of my life. In a hushed, trembling conversation, I recounted the discovery of the second phone and the damning message. The empathetic silence that followed, punctuated by gentle reassurances, did little to soothe the raging storm within me. Instead, it deepened my resolve to confront the painful truth head-on. In the midst of this inner turmoil, I realized that our marriage had always been a delicate balancing act, maintained by a web of unspoken agreements and fragile compromises. The forgotten phone, an object I had assumed to be innocuous, was in fact a repository of hidden emotions, a silent witness to secrets that had festered beneath the surface for far too long. It was a stark reminder that the comfort of familiarity can sometimes blind us to the subtle erosions of trust and integrity. As I navigated the days that followed, I found myself oscillating between confrontation and retreat. There were moments when I yearned to demand answers, to rip open the carefully constructed facade and expose the raw truth. Yet, there were also times when the overwhelming pain forced me into a cocoon of introspection, where I questioned not just her actions, but my own shortcomings as a partner. I wondered if I had contributed to the slow decay of our intimacy, if my own failings had pushed her into the arms of deceit. Each morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through our bedroom window, I awoke to a profound sense of disorientation, a surreal detachment from the life that had once been so vibrant and full of promise. The ghost of that text message loomed large in every moment, a constant, unyielding reminder that nothing would ever be the same again. The forgotten phone had become the catalyst for an unraveling that was both inevitable and excruciatingly painful. In the quiet solitude of our shared spaces, I began to notice the little things: the way her eyes darted away when our gazes met, the fleeting hesitation in her voice when discussing the past, the guarded smiles that no longer reached her eyes. These subtle shifts, once dismissed as mere idiosyncrasies, now spoke volumes about a truth that lay hidden beneath layers of denial and pretense. I was forced to confront the possibility that the life we had known was built on a fragile illusion, one that could be shattered by a single, unanticipated spark. That spark had arrived unexpectedly, in the form of a glowing screen and a text message that bore the weight of 1,000 unspoken lies. I knew, with a painful certainty, that this was only the beginning of a journey through a landscape of broken trust and shattered dreams, a journey that would force me to face the darkest corners of my own heart. And as I stood there, in the half-light of an ordinary evening transformed by extraordinary revelation, I resolved to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the risks of confrontation and the possibility of irreversible loss. Yet, in that moment of despair, I also felt a stirring of resolve, a quiet determination to reclaim my life and rebuild it from the fragments of what once was. The forgotten phone, with its incriminating text, had set in motion a chain of events that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the very essence of human connection. Now, as I sit with the echo of that life-altering discovery resonating through every fiber of my being, I realize that the journey toward healing begins with the painful act of acknowledgement. I have no choice but to face the raw, unvarnished truth of our shared past, even if it means dismantling the comfortable narratives that once defined us. The light of that forgotten phone has illuminated more than just hidden messages. It has cast a stark, unforgiving light on the fragility of trust and the perilous cost of secrets. And so, I stand on the precipice of a future that remains uncertain, yet undeniably my own to shape, a future where every painful revelation is also a chance for rebirth and transformation. I never expected that the truth would come to me in such a clandestine manner, a flickering screen in the back of a worn leather purse. The revelation had been a jolt that shook the very foundation of my existence, and in the days following that fateful moment, I found myself trapped in a maze of doubt and shattered illusions. Now, as I sit alone in the dim light of our once shared study, every shadow and silent corner of our home whispers echoes of betrayal that I can neither silence nor ignore. In the wake of that devastating text, I became a reluctant detective in my own life. I started to retrace the hidden moments of our shared past, questioning the memories I once held dear. The forgotten phone, with its secret messages and silent betrayals, had opened a door into a hidden world I had never suspected. I began to scrutinize every detail, the way she tucked her purse so carefully into the backseat of her car, the extra layer of lipstick she'd applied before leaving for work, the hushed tone that replaced her usual laughter. Each observation, once insignificant, now carried the weight of a potential confession. I must admit, the nights after the discovery were the hardest. Sleep became a distant memory as my mind replayed the image of that glowing screen, each pixel a shard of our fractured trust. I wandered through the empty hallways of our home, my footsteps echoing like the relentless beat of my broken heart. I questioned the very nature of intimacy and love, wondering how two souls who once promised to share every secret could now harbor such stark divides. I was left to grapple with a new reality where every kind word and gentle gesture was tainted by the possibility of deception. One particularly cold evening, driven by a need to confront my fears, I decided to visit the cafe where we had spent countless mornings together. It was a place that used to exude warmth and familiarity, a refuge where our laughter mingled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Now, as I sat in that familiar booth alone, I felt as though I were an intruder in my own memories. Every clink of a cup, every murmur of conversation, served as a painful reminder of a love that had slowly eroded. I stared into my cup as if it could reveal the answers to questions that had no easy resolution, my mind swirling with recollections of happier times and the silent dread of what was to come. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and painful confrontation. I began to document my thoughts in a battered journal, each page a testament to the inner battle raging within me. I wrote about the surreal discovery, the numb shock of reading those cold, detached words, and the overwhelming sense of loneliness that settled in like a thick fog. The journal became both a confidant and a mirror, reflecting back the raw, unedited emotions that I had tried so desperately to bury. With each entry, I attempted to piece together the fractured remnants of our shared history, trying to discern the point at which trust had given way to secrecy. I found myself oscillating between bouts of rage and moments of desperate longing. There were times when I felt an uncontrollable urge to confront her, to demand answers, to see the truth in her eyes. Other moments left me paralyzed by fear, unable to face the reality that my world was unraveling before me. I began to question my own worth, wondering if I had been blind to the cracks in our foundation. Every memory of her gentle smile, every whisper of her reassurances, now felt like a calculated lie designed to mask a hidden truth. One day, after weeks of internal torment, I mustered the courage to broach the subject. I remember the heavy silence that filled our small kitchen as I placed the journal on the table. Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, now darted nervously away, as if they too sensed the approaching storm. I asked her softly, voice trembling with both fear and sorrow, "What is it that you've been keeping from me?" The question hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, ready to shatter with the slightest misstep. Her response was measured and cold, a stark contrast to the passionate love we had once shared. She spoke of long-forgotten moments, of trivial misunderstandings that had slowly built a wall between us. Yet, even as she spoke, I sensed the artifice behind her words, each sentence meticulously crafted to deflect and conceal. The conversation spiraled into a series of muted accusations and tearful denials. I saw in her eyes a glimmer of regret, perhaps even fear, but it was not enough to erase the sting of betrayal that had already taken root. That night, as I lay awake in our darkened bedroom, every sound became a reminder of the lies that had come between us. I replayed the conversation in my mind over and over, trying to extract some meaning from the tangled web of half-truths. I realized then that our marriage had been a delicate dance of secrets, a performance where each of us had played our part, carefully concealing the depths of our discontent. The forgotten phone was merely the final act in a long series of deceptions, a painful punctuation to a story that had been unfolding silently for years. In the weeks that followed, I sought refuge in solitude, taking long walks through the rain-soaked streets of our city. The rhythmic patter of raindrops on the pavement was a constant companion as I wandered through my thoughts, trying to piece together a coherent narrative from the fragments of our shattered lives. I revisited places that held echoes of our happier past, a park bench where we had once shared secrets under the canopy of autumn leaves, a quiet bookstore where we had spent lazy afternoons lost in conversation. Each location was a painful reminder of what we had lost, yet also a catalyst for introspection. During these solitary journeys, I began to confront the possibility that perhaps the betrayal was not solely hers to bear. I looked inward, questioning my own role in the gradual disintegration of our intimacy. Had I been too complacent, too absorbed in my own routines to notice the silent signals of discontent? There were moments when I recalled her subtle gestures of affection, the way her hand lingered on mine, the fleeting glances that once held the promise of forever, and wondered how those moments could have given way to such profound silence. I realized that our marriage, like any human endeavor, was a complex tapestry woven from both joy and sorrow, passion and neglect. The forgotten phone, with its damning text, was a symptom of deeper wounds that had festered over time. My search for understanding led me to unexpected places. I began to attend a support group for those grappling with infidelity and betrayal, a space where strangers' stories echoed my own inner turmoil. In that circle of shared pain, I discovered that I was not alone in my struggle. The raw, unfiltered accounts of others, tales of deceit, loss, and eventual healing, provided a strange comfort. They reminded me that while the sting of betrayal was deep, it was not insurmountable. Each shared story was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a quiet declaration that even the most shattered hearts could find a way to mend. One evening, after a particularly moving session at the support group, I returned home with a fragile sense of hope. I decided that if I was to rebuild my life, I needed to reclaim my own identity, a self that had been obscured by the relentless pursuit of a perfect union. I started to explore the things that once brought me joy, rediscovering old hobbies, reaching out to friends I had long neglected, and even venturing into new experiences that challenged my perceptions of who I was. Each small step was a defiant act against the despair that had threatened to consume me, a quiet rebellion against the idea that betrayal had defined my worth. Yet, even as I embarked on this journey of self-discovery, the memory of that glowing screen continued to haunt me. I would catch myself staring at my phone in quiet moments, half expecting to see a new message that would further unravel the remnants of our past. The ghost of that secret device lingered in every corner of my mind, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the ease with which it could be broken. I began to understand that healing was not a linear process, it was a series of steps forward and back, a delicate balancing act between remembrance and release. At times, I found myself questioning whether I would ever be able to forgive, not her, but myself. The self-reproach was relentless, a quiet voice that accused me of not having seen the signs, of being too trusting, too vulnerable. I wrestled with the notion that perhaps I had contributed to the creation of this secret world, a world where unspoken desires and unmet needs festered until they erupted into betrayal. The journey inward was painful, filled with moments of raw introspection that forced me to confront the darker aspects of my own nature. But with each confrontation, I began to realize that forgiveness was not about forgetting or excusing the hurt, it was about reclaiming the parts of myself that had been lost in the wake of shattered dreams. In the solitude of another rain-soaked night, I found myself at the edge of our once-shared balcony, gazing out at a city that seemed indifferent to the storms raging within me. The rain washed over me, a cleansing yet merciless reminder that every drop carried the weight of my sorrow. It was in that moment of raw exposure that I understood. The path to healing was not about erasing the past, but about embracing it, the totality of the pain, the love, and the lessons learned along the way. I allowed the tears to flow freely, each one a silent vow that I would not be defined by this betrayal, that I would emerge stronger and more whole than before. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to stitch together the remnants of my identity. I found solace in the pages of books, in the art of storytelling, and in the simple act of acknowledging my own worth. I learned that the pain inflicted by betrayal was a harsh teacher, one that forced me to question everything I thought I knew about love and trust. And in that painful questioning, I discovered a quiet resilience, a strength that had been dormant, waiting to be awakened by the harsh realities of life. Now, as I sit here in the fading light of another uncertain day, I understand that the journey of healing is an ongoing process, a mosaic of shattered pieces that, when carefully reassembled, form a portrait of survival, growth, and, ultimately, hope. The second phone, once a symbol of our crumbling marriage, has become a stark reminder of the complexities of human relationships. It taught me that even in the face of profound betrayal, there lies the possibility of renewal. And while I may never fully erase the scars of that devastating text, I have come to see them as marks of a life lived authentically, of a heart that dared to love deeply, even when it meant risking everything. I never imagined that the bitter residue of betrayal would eventually morph into a strange, almost gentle liberation, a freedom forged in the crucible of heartache and self-discovery. In the months following that fateful revelation, my world had splintered into shards of anger, sorrow, and confusion, each piece a stark reminder of the life I once knew. Yet now, standing at the threshold of a future that was entirely my own, I began to see that the darkness of those shattered moments held within it the potential for rebirth. I remember one particularly cold evening when I returned home after a long day of solitary wandering through the city's winding streets. The air was crisp, and the distant hum of nighttime traffic was punctuated by the occasional sound of laughter spilling from a nearby cafe. As I stepped into the apartment we had once shared, every object seemed to speak a language of memories, some tender, some painfully bitter. The echoes of our past were everywhere, in the familiar creak of the floorboards, in the faded photographs that adorned the mantel, even in the lingering aroma of her favorite perfume. For a moment, I hesitated at the door, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. But with a deep, steadying breath, I stepped inside, determined to confront the past not as a victim, but as a man ready to reclaim his narrative. I began to methodically unpack boxes filled with relics of our shared life, a wedding invitation saved in a dusty album, a scarf she'd worn on one of our happier autumn days, a letter filled with dreams of a future that now seemed like a distant fantasy. Each item was a tangible reminder of a love that had once been vibrant and whole. Yet as I held these fragments of memory, I also realized that they no longer belonged to a past defined by betrayal. They were simply chapters in a book that I was now rewriting. The forgotten phone and its devastating message had been the catalyst, a brutal awakening that forced me to sift through years of quiet complacency and painful secrets. In the quiet solitude of my restored home, I started a new ritual. Every evening, as dusk crept over the city and the first hints of twilight brushed the skyline, I would sit at my old desk with a fresh notebook and a pen that felt weighty in my hand. I wrote down my thoughts, my regrets, my hopes, and even the smallest sparks of joy that began to emerge from the depths of despair. I recorded dreams of a future unburdened by the chains of mistrust, a future where my heart could heal, unencumbered by the ghosts of what had been lost. The act of writing became both an exorcism and a celebration, a way to lay bare the fragments of my soul so that I might eventually piece them back together into something resilient and real. My journey toward healing was neither linear nor predictable. There were days when the sting of that one illuminated screen, the cold text that had shattered everything, would surge back unexpectedly. I would find myself in a crowded room, surrounded by the gentle hum of conversation, only to be momentarily overwhelmed by a wave of isolation and regret. In those moments, I learned to lean into my vulnerability. I would close my eyes, breathe deeply, and remind myself that pain was not a permanent state but a sign that I was alive, that I was in the process of change. I sought out therapy, joining group sessions and one-on-one meetings where I could share my story with others who had known betrayal and heartbreak. The voices of strangers, raw and unfiltered, wove together a tapestry of shared experience that made me feel less alone in my suffering. One day, during a particularly moving session at a local support group, I encountered a story that resonated with me on a deep level. A man spoke about how a seemingly insignificant act, a misdirected text, a forgotten object, had upended his world, yet ultimately led him to rediscover his own strength and capacity for love. His words struck a chord, echoing my own silent battles, and I realized that my journey was not one of endless despair but one of incremental healing. That conversation marked a turning point. I began to see that while the past could never be undone, it did not have to dictate my future. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in activities that once brought me joy but had long been abandoned in the wake of heartache. I took up painting, a hobby that allowed me to express emotions too vast for words. With each brushstroke, I poured out the tangled complexities of my inner life onto the canvas. The colors were sometimes dark and stormy, other times bright and hopeful, yet each painting was a testament to the transformative power of creativity. Slowly, I began to build a new identity, a mosaic of experiences that included pain, yes, but also resilience, growth, and the quiet beauty of self-reclamation. I reconnected with old friends who had been patient and kind, even when I had retreated behind a wall of silence. Together, we revisited old haunts, the park where we had once picnicked on lazy summer afternoons, the waterfront where the sunset would ignite the horizon in bursts of fiery orange. In these moments of shared laughter and remembrance, I found that the bonds of friendship could mend what had been broken, even if they could not restore the past to its former perfection. It was in these honest, unguarded moments that I began to rediscover the joy of living, a joy that did not depend on a flawless love story, but on the resilience of the human spirit. As autumn gave way to winter, the days grew shorter and the nights colder, yet within me, a quiet warmth began to kindle. I remembered that I was not defined by the pain of betrayal, but by the choices I made in the aftermath. One chilly evening, I attended a local art exhibit, a gathering of souls who, like me, had turned their struggles into expressions of beauty. As I walked among the diverse works on display, I realized that every piece of art, every carefully crafted narrative, was a reminder that life's most profound lessons often emerge from its darkest moments. I felt a surge of gratitude for the journey, for the harsh lessons that had led me to this newfound clarity. There was a moment during the exhibit when I found myself standing before a large, abstract painting, a riot of color and texture that defied easy interpretation. It reminded me of the tumult within me, a swirling vortex of emotions that, when embraced, could create something extraordinarily beautiful. I lingered there for a long time, absorbing the complexity of the work, and in that silent communion with art, I realized that I, too, could transform my pain into a powerful testament to resilience. That realization sparked a deeper commitment to myself, a vow to never let the shadows of betrayal obscure the light of possibility. In the midst of my rebuilding, life presented me with an unexpected gift. A few months after the initial devastation, I met someone who, through gentle persistence and genuine kindness, began to fill the spaces in my heart that I had once thought irreparably broken. Our encounter was unremarkable by the standards of dramatic romance. It was a quiet meeting in a bookstore on a rainy afternoon, a brief exchange over a shared love of obscure literature. Yet, as we talked about our favorite authors and the messy, unpredictable nature of life, I felt an ease that I had not known in years. This person did not rush to erase my past. Instead, they acknowledged it, and in doing so, helped me see that every scar carried a story worth telling. Our friendship blossomed slowly, nurtured by mutual understanding and respect. I discovered that the process of healing is not about forgetting the past, but about integrating it into the mosaic of who we are. In this gentle companionship, I learned that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to authentic connection. Together, we explored the city's hidden corners, the quiet gardens, the time-worn bookstores, the little cafes that seemed to exist out of time. In each shared moment, I found a glimmer of hope, a reminder that the future could be reimagined, not as a sterile void free of pain, but as a canvas on which new dreams could be painted. There were days when the old wounds would flare unexpectedly, a misplaced word, a familiar scent, the sound of a ringtone that mimicked the one which had once shattered my trust. In those moments, I would pause, draw a deep breath, and remind myself of the progress I had made. I recognized that healing is a journey without a final destination, an ongoing process of embracing the past while daring to dream of a better tomorrow. I began to see that the forgotten phone, once a symbol of our ruined marriage, had inadvertently become a turning point, a painful lesson that had led me to discover the depths of my own resilience and the beauty of renewal. As winter slowly melted into the promise of spring, I felt a subtle shift within me, a cautious optimism that, while tempered by the memories of betrayal, allowed room for the possibility of love again. I found solace in the quiet moments of sunrise, in the gentle chirping of birds heralding a new day, in the soft whispers of wind through budding branches. The city, with all its scars and hidden stories, began to feel like a living, breathing entity that, much like me, was capable of transformation. Each day was an opportunity to rewrite my story, to honor the past without letting it dictate my future. Now, as I pen these final reflections, I am acutely aware that the journey from despair to healing is neither neat nor complete. There are still moments when the pain of that long-ago betrayal surfaces unbidden, a memory of a text message, the echo of a conversation, the silent reminder of a love that once was. But I have come to understand that those painful echoes are not chains that bind me to a broken past. They are stepping stones on the path toward a fuller, more authentic life. I have learned to accept the duality of my existence, that pain and joy can coexist, each enriching the other, each contributing to the intricate tapestry of who I am. In the quiet of my study, surrounded by journals filled with confessions and dreams, I feel a profound sense of gratitude for the journey I have endured. The forgotten second phone, once a harbinger of ruin, has become a symbol of transformation, a reminder that even the most devastating moments can lead to unexpected growth. I now see that every heartbreak has the potential to become a catalyst for renewal, that the shards of a shattered past can be gathered and reassembled into a mosaic of resilience, compassion, and self-discovery. I stand here today, on the precipice of an uncertain yet hopeful future, no longer defined solely by the betrayal that once threatened to consume me. I have reclaimed my narrative, piecing together a life that is richer, more complex, and more real than any illusion of perfection could ever be. The pain remains, a quiet undercurrent in the symphony of my existence, but it no longer holds me captive. Instead, it fuels my determination to live fully, to love, to create, to embrace every facet of the human experience, both its light and its shadows. As dusk settles over the city once again, I lace up my shoes and step out into the cool evening air, not as a man haunted by the past, but as one who has learned to cherish each new moment. I carry within me the scars of a love that was lost and the hope of a future yet to be written. And with every step I take, I honor the truth that has emerged from the ruins, a truth that in every ending lies the promise of a new beginning.